Hello, welcome to Life Talk. I'm Mark Crutcher, president of Life Dynamics, and it is July 3rd, the day before July 4th, 2018, and I'm joined by the usual suspects, my assistant Renee. Hello, Renee. And my daughter, Sheila.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's good to be here.
It is.
Yes, it is. Good to be anywhere when you're my age.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, wow.
We're going to, of course, like a lot of things that are going on, as you all know, the biggest issue going on right now is the Supreme Court, and we're going to have some thoughts on that here in a minute. But first, we have a couple of things to go over today before we get to the Supreme Court, and we'll join those now. An English court has approved a no pro-life activity within 100 meters of either side of an abortion clinic. Now, the interesting thing here is, and let's make sure people understand, 100 meters is over a football field, and this is the radius. So if it's in the middle of a street, you've got 100 yards this way and 100 yards this way. You got 2 football fields that you can't have any kind of pro-life activity in.
So much for freedom of speech.
Right. And that's the issue. The American left has an assault on freedom of speech. We're seeing this in college campuses right here in the United States. These are the people that have always told us how much they love freedom of speech, but now all of a sudden they're opposed to it. And let me tell you what's going on here. You've heard me say, and I think you've probably heard it too, I've been saying this for years, and I wrote about it in Firestorm that I wrote back in the 1980s. The closer we get to victory, the more vicious our enemies are going to become. And we're seeing this. And it's not just in the pro-life issue, it's in everything. But pro-life is the main issue. They are becoming more vicious, more violent. This country is close to a tipping point of violence by the hardcore, godless left. And the left is becoming more godless, less committed to free speech. The only free speech they approve of is speech that you give that agrees with them.
Well, I mean, England, the UK is further along than we are in terms of course, socialism.
Right.
But, even then, a lot of them say, freedom of speech. How is this freedom of speech? It isn't.
Right. Not at all.
And they're admitting, the court that made this ruling admits that nothing has happened yet, but they're just saying it could happen. So therefore, we're gonna take away the free speech rights of these pro-lifers.
Well, all of this came about because supposedly a pro-lifer had beat up a pro-abort, and so they are now saying that they're taking things into their own hands, and they're going to put an end to it all, which...
How many times does a pro-lifer get beat up by pro-aborts when they're
covered it.
out?
Yeah.
Many
times. We've covered it right here on Life Talk.
Protesting and stuff.
That's right.
Exactly. So
We've covered it right here on Life Talk.
heaven forbid we shine a light on that. you
Right.
know.
Exactly.
It's outrageous. And to give you another example of it, we got a email that you gave me, Renee, or a text, whatever this thing is, some kind of smoke signal or something. A viewer wrote in that he had a review of my Alpha 21 on Amazon, and they took it down.
A comment.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
And they took it down for violating their code of conduct.
But you're seeing that across all forms of social media. With the fake news, they started out with the fake news, and now they're censoring comments. They're blocking pages for
Right.
offensive content. They're trying to be the gatekeepers of social media and individually led groups and
Right.
stuff. And so they're doing that not with only abortion but other things as well.
Right.
So
Well,
it doesn't surprise me that
It reinforces what we've been trying to make people understand here for years. We are in a cultural civil war, and that's what this is all about. And these people cannot win in the court of public opinion. They cannot defeat the conservatives in this country and the pro-lifers in this country on ideas. They can't debate with us. They can't win. So their response is just shut them down. Just shut everybody down.
exactly.
And this kind of brings up something else that I think is interesting, that we're seeing all this right now. A couple of days ago was the anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act would have never, ever been passed had these restrictions on free speech been in place then. Conservatives, liberals, it wouldn't matter. The people that were opposed to the passage of these civil rights bills, if they had had the ability that the American left is exercising today to shut down dissent, the Civil Rights Act would have never been passed.
And plus, the big thing is, yes, we should celebrate the Civil Rights Act. But if people think that the Civil Rights Act, freed African Americans, they're wrong. It's a different form of isolation and slavery, if you will, but it's for the preborn.
Right, that's right. And we know from Alpha 21, we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is no argument about this, the impetus for the legalization of abortion was black genocide. That's what it started out as. That's what it was designed to do. And so, like you said, the Civil Rights Act didn't stop that.
No.
Matter of fact, many of the people that helped pass the Civil Rights Act are now the perpetrators of this crime against humanity that is being carried out against the African American community. And the bottom line is, I wrote an article about this the other day, in which I said, and I still say this is true, there will never be civil rights for the born unless there's civil rights for the unborn. Civil rights have to begin in the womb, or they don't begin at all.
Well, I mean, it's the basic fundamentals of respecting life life enough to protect the most innocent of life. And if you can't do that, how are you supposed to respect any life?
You don't.
Exactly.
You don't. Anyway, that's something that people need to understand. Again, civil rights begin in the womb, or they don't begin. Period, end of story. Now it's time for us to take a break for our new segment, RoeBots.
In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court legalized abortion nationwide. The decision is called Roe v. Wade, and those who defend it are known as RoeBots. This is how they think.
You people are just anti-choice extremists who are trying to use the political process to force your religious views on everyone else. Keep your rosaries off my ovaries.
Well, first off, regarding this rosaries and ovaries issue, if you happen to be one of those truly bewildered individuals who thinks the pro-life movement is trying to stake a claim to your ovaries, let me assure you that we are as indifferent to your ovaries as we are to your spleens, your gallbladders, and your tonsils. I should also point out that a lot of us are not Catholic and don't even have rosaries. Secondly, I will confess that when choice is defined as the right to butcher innocent and defenseless children by the millions, then we are indeed anti-choice. If that makes us extremist, I guess we'll just have to live with that. As for the claim that we are trying to pass laws to force our religious views on others, that is pure idiocy. The fact that a new human being is created at conception is biology, not theology. And just because people of faith acknowledge that reality, that does not make abortion a religious matter. I mean, an engineer who designs airplanes could also be a Christian. In fact, many of them are. But that does not make aerodynamics a religious issue. We should also recognize that if we're going to reject laws simply because they coincide with some religious belief, then we will have to do away with all of our laws. In this case, to say that abortion should be off limits to the law because most of the people opposed to it are Christians is as moronic as saying we should not have laws against armed robbery because thou shalt not steal is one of the 10 commandments. Let's also not forget that the civil rights movement has often been headquartered in churches and led by pastors who have openly stated that their commitment to the civil rights movement is motivated by their Christian faith. But that doesn't make the struggle against racial discrimination a religious issue. The fact is, someone doesn't have to be very religious to say it's wrong to butcher a helpless unborn child. All they have to be is a decent human being. We're back, and there's been so much talk over the last few days about the Supreme Court. It's kind of hard to say what can we bring to the table that's new, but I think we can. First thing, I wrote an article the other day that you guys got out a lot on social media, and we had a lot of good comments on it, pointing out that for all these people that claim to be pro-life and hate Donald Trump, and there's a bunch of them. Yeah. We know some personally. We had to throw one off the Life Talk because she was going to vote for Hillary Clinton. Said you can't be pro-life. And
There's a big difference between not liking Trump and then voting for Hillary. You know, that's
Right.
what people call her, is Hillary, because she would support abortion up until, you know, at least she supports late term abortion.
right, she's totally
Yeah.
100% pro-abortion at any time. And I want to point something out, as I did in this article. Had Hillary Clinton won instead of Donald Trump, had these so-called pro-lifers had their way, she would have appointed, right now, she would be appointing her third Supreme Court justice. And everybody said, well, wait a minute, Trump's only supporting his second. How would she be supporting her third, or proposing her third? Ruth Bader Ginsburg made it very clear during the election that if Hillary Clinton was elected, she would retire and let Hillary Clinton fill her position.
Right.
So this would have been Hillary Clinton's third appointment to the Supreme Court. In other words, in the next few weeks, 1/3 of the U.S. Supreme Court would be held by people that were appointed by Hillary Clinton. And 2 more, which would make it a majority of the Supreme Court, would have been appointed by either Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. That's what would have happened.
Right.
And that's not debatable. That's a fact.
Exactly. And so I'm not a fan of politicians in general, as y'all know, but I'm glad that she wasn't the one appointing, you know,
Right,
because
exactly.
we, not only would the pro-life movement be in trouble, but the whole country would be in jeopardy.
Well, if Hillary Clinton had won, I'm going to tell you right now, the pro-life movement would be on life support right now. And she'd have her hand on the plug. She'd be the one determining when to pull the plug on us.
Right.
And where we would be as a nation right now, I shudder to think, had Hillary Clinton become president.
People thought Obama was bad.
Oh,
Yeah.
and he was.
Yeah, but nothing compared to what Hillary would have been.
Right. Now, something that, and of course, Sheila's pretty new to the show, but you and I have talked about, Renee, many times over the years. In this country, whether you're talking about politics or you're talking about the Supreme Court, it's always about abortion. I don't care what the issue is. At some level, it gets back to abortion. In this case, we all know this is not debatable. If they're throwing out all these arguments, oh, it's about immigration, or it's about redistricting, it's about this issue, it's about this issue, it's about this issue over here. The left, the godless left in this country, is lying through their teeth. It's not about these other issues, and they are basically admitting it with some of their rhetoric. But Renee, do you think, for example, if Trump were to come out today and say, listen, I've had an epiphany on the abortion issue, and I'm not going to put anybody on the Supreme Court from now on that doesn't totally support Roe versus Wade, do you think all opposition to him would evaporate immediately?
Oh, definitely. Well, and he's already said that he's not going to do a litmus test on anybody that he chooses to be
Right.
up there, which is a downfall, I think, for the Republicans, because the Democrats definitely do it 100%
Every time.
every time.
It's a litmus test. And they'll even admit it. And I want to make an argument. I want to make a point here. If you watch all the stuff like we've been doing the last few days on the Supreme Court, you have a lot of these degenerates coming out defending Roe versus Wade. Not one of them have I heard make a constitutional argument for it, because they know you can't make a constitutional argument.
And you have even had people who are for abortion say, from a legal standpoint, Roe versus Wade shouldn't have been
Right.
upheld. You know, it should have never been approved from a legal standpoint.
Well, you had a previous Supreme Court justice who was a pro-abort, Sandra Day O'Connor, who said Roe versus Wade is on a collision course with itself because it was badly decided. And she's a pro-abort, and that's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
They cannot make a constitutional argument for it. So they make all the results arguments. If we outlaw abortion, this is going to happen, or this is going to happen. That is not the Supreme Court's responsibility.
No, it's not.
The Supreme Court is not out here to create results. The Supreme Court is not out here to create a particular political outcome. They're not out here to advance a particular political agenda. They're here to interpret the Constitution, period, end of story. They don't pass laws. The legislature passes laws.
Well, I mean, just like abortion, they've come far from what they're supposed
Right,
to do.
exactly.
So.
And but none of these people are out here making a constitutional argument. I have not heard one person on the left say, well, abortion was correctly decided because of this constitutional argument and this one and this one. They can't do it because it's not in there. Abortion is not in the Constitution. And now you have people like Susan Collins, senators
Yeah.
from Maine. She's our version of Nancy Pelosi. They're both crazy as drugstore rats. But anyway, she says, now she's come out and admitted, she's at least honest, unlike some of these other people, says she will not vote for anybody who she says is hostile to abortion rights. Now, I would ask her, what happened to the no litmus test, which is what we've heard over and over again when we go up against an appointee of, let's say, Barack Obama, or if Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton had been allowed to make one and said that person's not acceptable because of abortion, they jump up here and say, oh, there should not be a litmus test on abortion. There should not be a litmus test to put people in the Supreme Court. And then she comes out and says, oh, there shouldn't be a litmus test, but
Right.
if this person's not pro-abortion, I'm not going to support them.
Yeah.
And also, I would ask this woman, obviously I'll never get the chance, she wouldn't have the guts to come on here and debate with this. What happened to the big tent? We're always told, as so-called, if we're going to be loyal Republicans, which I don't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat, but if you're going to be a loyal Republican, you got to vote for pro-abortion Republicans like Collins under this big tent theory. The Republican Party's got to be like this big tent.
I think that you need to explain what that means. I don't know that a lot.
Well, yeah, back when Reagan was president, his chief of staff was a guy named Lee Atwater. And Lee Atwater was a pro-abortion Republican. And he came up with this idea that if you want to be loyal, you've got to support even people that are okay with baby killing, because the Republican Party needs to be this big tent where everybody can feel welcome. At the time, I said, well, big tents are filled with clowns and jugglers. That's what you find in the big tent. And that's been proven time and again.
So much for the individual issues. Let's just vote based on the two-party system.
Right.
You know. And but the thing is, a lot of people now are getting tired of that, which is good, you know, for the pro-life movement too, in the abortion issue.
Vote on the pro-life issue.
Yeah.
And Collins says, she tries to cover up her litmus test and big tent. And by the way, she's one of the ones who benefits from the big tent, because she's one of the pro-aborts that Lee Atwater was talking about. Oh, we got to support Susan Collins because she's a Republican and she's welcome in the big tent. She's one of the clowns and jugglers. But she's trying to justify her decision to not support a nominee who is, as she said, hostile to abortion rights, by saying it's about precedent and stare decisis. Stare decisis means you support what's already been ruled on in the past. You just blindly support it. In other words, because a previous court said this, then you got to say it, and things don't change. Despite the fact that the Supreme Court has a long history of reversing itself on previous rulings and finding out that it was wrong.
If that's the case, why have politics in the first place? If we're just going to go off of what was previously
Right.
ruled, I mean, she would be out of a job then.
We'd say, well, that's the way we do things, because that's the way we've always done things.
You're
Right?
out of a job.
She says, somebody being pro-life said, that would mean to me that their judicial philosophy did not include a respect for established decisions, established law, unquote. That's what she said. So what I'd like to hold her feet to the fire is this. Had she been a senator in 1860, would she have voted to continue slavery? Because the Supreme Court had already ruled in a prior decision in 1857, Dred Scott versus Sanford, that slavery was constitutional. So therefore, it's established law, right? It's established principle by a sitting Supreme Court. So obviously she would support legalized slavery under that basis. And if everybody did that, slavery would still be legal today. What about in 1900, when the big issue was women's suffrage? Were women going to be allowed to vote? Well, for over 100 years, we had male-only voting in America. That had been upheld by courts time and time again. Males were the only people who could vote. So I assume Collins then would have to go along and said, well, we have this stare decisis, we have this 100-year history. That's a lot longer than we've had Roe versus Wade.
Only men should vote. I'm not going to give my voice to the women's suffrage movement. I'm just going to keep quiet because that's how it's been.
That's how it's been, and we have to go along with it because of that. These people, well, anyway, don't get me started on Susan Collins.
It's hypocritical. That's what it is.
To say the least. And obviously, when you hear the woman talk, she's not a mental giant by any stretch of the imagination. But even she should be able to see how hypocritical she's being and how inconsistent she's being. But I'd like to ask her, so that means you'd have voted for slavery, because that's the way it always had been for hundreds of years.
Oh, well, she wouldn't have been able to vote in the first place.
Right. She wouldn't have been there to vote to begin with.
So is she going to retroactively say, oh, now I support women's suffrage to vote against slavery?
Right, and vote against women voting. It's amazing. But before we leave, I want to issue a couple of warning signs here on this Supreme Court thing. First off, I've heard some people say that we're holding our breath right now to hope that Donald Trump doesn't betray us. And just in the last couple of days, there's these rumors floating around that he's added more people to that 25-person list that he might actually nominate. And so people are getting a little nervous saying he might betray us. And he might, who knows? Yeah. I don't think so, but let me tell you what the betrayal that we do face is. Donald Trump might do the right thing. He might put somebody on there that has made it clear that they are pro-life in favor of protecting the unborn child. Then that person could betray us. Yeah. That's what's happened in the past. And I want to point out to people that the Supreme Court nominee that he's going to put on there will replace a man that was appointed by Ronald Reagan. And so Kennedy betrayed us time and time again. And you look at even Roberts, he betrayed us on the Obamacare deal. Obamacare would have been wiped off the map a long time ago had it not been for John Roberts. So we've been betrayed many, many times, and that's the betrayal that we've got to be watching out for.
I think it's safe to say that you should hold your breath because it's politics. You know, you never know what's going to happen. But I think that we can at least be hopeful that he'll support the right person. Right, and that person then will remain true to their principles. Yeah. And,
hopefully that person is Amy, what is it, Coney Barrett.
Barrett,
yeah. She's very Catholic, has 7 kids, religious, and that is an issue
and
for
she's
them.
made it clear she's pro-life.
Yes.
And if she does get nominated, all of these feminist groups and these pro-women, are they going to be behind her? No. What happened to, the solidarity of women that, that are for women's causes? They're not going to support her at all.
No.
Instead, they're going to keep on bashing Trump and divert their attention from a woman being a nominee.
Right. Well, they'll go more berserk toward her than they were toward a man because they think if you're a conservative, pro-life woman, you're a sellout. Yeah. You're a turncoat. You're a Benedict Arnold. That's what they would say about you or about you. So they'll be more vicious toward her. And if you notice, all these attacks that are going on around the country against conservatives, they're attacking women. Have you noticed that? And it's almost exclusively women that they're attacking. They're following them into restaurants or confronting them on the streets or threatening them or getting in their face and calling them names and calling them all kinds of horrible things. It's women that they're attacking. And very often it's women who are doing the attacking and women who are being attacked. And I remember years ago, there was a story on, I think it's ABC or NBC News, about the, y'all may not remember this. I know you won't, Sheila, because this was long before you were born. The animal rights people used to go up and down the street, and believe me, nobody loves animals more than we do, right? We've got animals all over this building.
And the PETA group,
Right. but the hardcore animal rights people would go onto the streets, and they'd go near a furrier store and wait for a woman to come out in a fur coat and throw paint on them. They were using blue paint, throw blue paint on her fur coat. And I thought it was so interesting they did this story, and even this reporter I thought was very, very insightful here. He said, you go up to these older women wearing fur coats. So you pick on these old women, you throw blue paint on their fur coat. But right down the street is a biker bar with these guys just dripping in leather. I don't see you down there throwing blue paint on their leather
They
outfits.
wouldn't dare.
I wonder why.
They prey on who they perceive
As weak.
as the weak ones.
Right. But they don't go down there to the biker bar. They're not about to do that because they don't want to wind up in the emergency room. It's very simple. So anyway, we've got to be concerned about that betrayal. But I'm not as concerned about Trump betraying us as I am whoever he appoints betraying us. That's who the betrayal. And let's make sure people understand something. I hear all these people jumping up and down about the possibility of overturning Roe. Overturning Roe does not end abortion in America. That just sends it back to 50 states. So now we have 50 battles to fight. We're fighting them in 50 battles right now. But what we could wind up with is what the pro-aborts always said many years ago when they were right about this, a patchwork quilt. So let's just go in the Northeast, for example, or in the northern part of the United States, for example. New York, the more godless a community is, and New York is one of them, and California and places like that. New York would, I'm sure, immediately put something in their state constitution, if they don't already have it, that would codify Roe and say abortion's legal right up to the moment of birth, even a little bit after birth, so you can get away with partial birth abortions and all this stuff. So we'll even extend it a little bit outside the womb. We'll pay for it with taxpayer dollars and so forth. Pennsylvania has always been a relatively pro-life state for a state in that part of the country. Certainly probably the most pro-life state up there. So they might pass restrictions or they could even ban it. But then that means this woman from Pennsylvania just goes to New York.
I mean, a lot more states, I feel like, nowadays would not allow legal abortion. But like you said, then you have the big states like California that would, and New York that would. And so while the pro-life movement may have a lot of victories, they're going to have big defeats.
You're going to have big problems.
Yes.
I think you have a situation like that. There's going to be airlines that are going to come out with cheap flights. Let's say you ban abortion in Texas, but it's legal in Missouri, just picking one out. They'll have cheap flights. Southwest or some liberal company like Southwest will come out and put cheap flights from Texas to Missouri.
Or they may have like abortion wagons, like how they did with birth control and,
Right.
Plan B and stuff, how they would have vans that would go, travel across the country providing these things. So that's probably what would
Or
happen
that's
too.
like the women on waves deal. Or as
exactly.
Zentra used to call them the women on drugs. If you're going to go out here and get in the middle of the ocean in a ship with somebody from, Sweden or somewhere doing abortions. But anyway, let's make sure we don't get too wrapped around the axle over the idea of reversing Roe. If Roe is reversed if the Supreme Court just comes out here and says this was badly decided, it's not a federal matter, it's a state matter, this battle's going to go on for a long time, and we're not going to save any babies through that particular ruling. If they come out here and said Roe was badly decided because the unborn child is a person for purposes of the Constitution, then it's over. That ends it.
Right.
So that's what we have to be working towards. But let's just don't automatically assume that if Roe is overturned, that's the end of the problem, because it's not.
It would be a victory for some and a defeat for others, and it
Well-
would make the pro-life movement's job a lot harder trying to target those individual states.
Well, and the bottom line reality is overturning Roe on the basis that it's not a federal matter and that it was poorly decided to begin with, that doesn't protect one baby in the United States. Every baby in the United States is still legally abortable at that point, because there will be some place not too far away where that baby can be transported and butchered. And so we've got to keep that in mind, and let's not get too wrapped around the axle about just simply overturning Roe. Okay, I'm out of time. Anything you guys got?
I don't.
No comments we need to talk about? Nothing? All right. All right. Well, I think that's it. Until next Tuesday and our next edition of Life Talk, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you next week.